There are animated movies that try to look appealing. Then there are animated movies that try to look realistic. And then there's Rango. A movie looks at the audience and says, what if everybody was ugly, but artistically ugly? And somehow it works. The movie is dusty, wrinkled, sunburnt, dehydrated, and borderline disgusting. And I mean that as a compliment. But underneath all that dirt is a surprisingly thoughtful story about identity, performance, and what happens when the character you pretend to be becomes the person everyone needs you to become. So grab yourself a glass of water, because trust me, when you're watching this movie, you're going to feel quenched. And let's talk about Rango. Welcome back to the Cartoon Palooza, where we talk animated movies, industry news, and trends. And today we're going to be talking about Gore Verbinski's first foray into feature animation. Visually, Rango is one of the most distinct animated movies I've ever seen. This was Industrial Light and Magic's first feature-length animated film from start to finish. And apparently they arrived with something to prove. The lightings, texture, and composition are incredible. Every scale, feather, wrinkle, and grain of sand feels deliberately placed. This never looks like a movie where things were half-butted. And the best way I could describe the character designs are beautifully grotesque. These animals look like they've been living in the desert for 45 years, smoking 2 packs a day and arguing with the electric company. Nobody's soft, nobody's clean, nobody looks like they were designed primarily to sell toys. Even Rango himself has this awkward, uneven shape. His eyes don't always seem to agree where they're looking, his body is constantly folding in on itself, and every movement exposes how uncomfortable he is in his own skin. That's impressive because the visuals aren't simply impressive. They tell us what the characters are. The residents of Dirt live in a town without water. Their colors are faded, their skin are hardened, and their clothes are worn down. They don't merely live in the desert. The desert has physically become a part of them. Having legendary cinematographer Roger Deakins involved with consulting how the lighting should be in every frame makes everything feel intentional and well put. Probably something more animated movies can benefit from when it comes to cinematic storytelling. And then Rattlesnake Jake shows up, and good lord, his eyes are basically the eyes of Sauron with a cowboy hat. You don't need a tragic monologue explaining why he's dangerous. One look at his face and you know what the stake has done, and it would prevent him from at least entering 7 states. One of the smartest production choices was having the actors perform their scenes together on an open soundstage. Instead of recording every line alone in a booth, the cast could physically act out the scenes while the animators used the footage as reference. And you can feel the difference. Every character has a distinct walk, posture, and rhythm. Beans moves differently from Rango. The Bear barely moves because his authority fills the room. Rattlesnake Jake slithers into every frame like he already knows everybody's terrified of him. And Rango? He never stops performing. His entire body is basically an improv exercise. He stretches, spins, poses, and throws himself around because he's constantly trying to figure out which version of himself will impress the people standing in front of him. That also means Johnny Depp gets to eat every single piece of scenery within a 30-mile radius. And normally I would complain that this is Johnny Depp just hamming it up like most of his movies, like Pirates of the Caribbean, but it fits. Rango is an acting-obsessed chameleon who has spent his entire life creating imaginary stories for himself. Of course he's theatrical. Of course every sentence sounds like it's being delivered by the back row of a Broadway theater. He isn't just lying to the people of Dirt, he's auditioning for the role of Rango. Now, one small warning, some of these characters have very thick accents. You may want the captions on, especially during scenes where several townspeople are talking at once, because occasionally it sounds less like dialogue and more like someone shaking a box of cowboy phrases down a staircase. But these performances are so committed that even when you miss a word, you understand the emotions. You can tell everyone involved is having a ball. I've always admired Gore Verbinski as a filmmaker, even when I don't completely love one of his movies. His work constantly pushes beyond what conventional live action can comfortably accomplish. Think about the evil cat from Mouse Hunt. Think about Davy Jones as the supernatural creatures in Pirates of the Caribbean. Even Samara from The Ring, as far as in a performance go, relies heavily on special effects. Verbinski has always used these effects with the exaggeration and imagination of an animator. So when he finally made an actual animated movie, it didn't feel like he was entering unfamiliar territory. It felt like somebody finally removed the speed limit, and Rango takes full advantage of that freedom. The camera moves like it's shooting a massive live-action western. The action has weight, the environments feel enormous, and the characters can be pushed into bizarre shapes without the movie being trapped in the uncanny valley. This is animation being used because the story demands the animation, not because somebody thought talking animals would be easier to market. And that sounds obvious, but there's a difference. Some animated movies feel like action scripts wearing cartoon costumes. Rango feels animated down to its bones. Now here's where movies and visuals run into trouble. Artists create this incredible world, and then the screenwriters have to sprint behind them, trying to convince them that they got a story too. But Rango actually has something meaningful underneath the spectacle. At its core, there is a story about self-discovery. Rango begins as a character without an identity. He lives alone in a terrarium, performing stories for toys because he has no real audience and no genuine sense of who he is. Then he lands in dirt and realizes he can be anybody he wants. So he invents a legend. He creates this confident gunslinger the town needs. And because people believe in him, Rango temporarily believes and begins believing in himself. But there's the catch. Pretending to be brave and actually being brave are two completely different things. And that distinction drives the entire movie. Rango enjoys being celebrated. He enjoys wearing the badge. He enjoys telling the stories about adventures that never happened. But once the town genuinely depends on him, the performance stops becoming fun. Suddenly, the lies have consequences, and it gives the movie a great question. If you begin by pretending to be the hero, can choosing to do something heroic eventually make you one? And yes, this is wrapped in a giant western featuring mariachi owls, but the emotional idea is real. The main plot concerns Dirt's disappearing water supply. The town's running dry, the bank reserves are vanishing, and the mayor is very obviously involved. And I mean, very obviously. This is not exactly a mystery where you're sitting there with a bulletin board, red string, and newspaper clippings trying to identify the criminal. You look at the mayor for 5 seconds and you go, yep, he's doing it. The mystery is less about who is manipulating the water and more about how he's doing it and what he hopes to gain. The mayor wants to control the town's future. He understands that whoever controls the water controls the population, the land, and eventually the money. That works thematically because it mirrors Rango's story. Both characters create narratives to influence other people. Rango constructs a fantasy because he desperately wants to belong. The mayor constructs one because he wants control. One lie eventually helps Rango discover his character, the other exposes the mayor's lack of character. My main criticism is that the story occasionally becomes too grand for its own good. We have the missing water supply, the bank robbery, the mayor's conspiracy, a mole family, the underground pipeline, Rattlesnake Jake, Rango's identity crisis, and enough references to classic westerns to film a film studies course. The movie mostly keeps everything moving, but there are moments when it feels like 3 westerns are trying to squeeze through the same door. Still, all those influences have purpose. Rango isn't simply parodying westerns. It genuinely understands why those stories work. It's about a stranger entering a broken town, creating a reputation and ultimately deciding whether he deserves it. I should also mention that Rango may surprise families who see the Nickelodeon logo and go, they're going to be watching SpongeBob or something. There are a lot of firearms in this movie, to the point where I'm probably going to have to not show footage and be very intentional about what I choose to show. Got characters pointing guns at one another, discuss shooting people, and there's even an imagery involving loading a revolver. That doesn't automatically make the movie inappropriate, but parents should know it's drawing directly from older westerns, rather than following the tone of something like Paw Patrol. Basically, don't put this in a room full of preschoolers and then act shocked when Rattlesnake Jake is arriving with a Gatling gun attached to his tail. You've been warned. You know the town's called Dirt. You got the warning signs. I mean, for older kids, this is willingness to be strange and slightly dangerous, and that's part of the appeal for them. The comedy also has that classic Nickelodeon edge, where some of the jokes feel like they come directly from Rocko's Modern Life, where they sneak humor past younger audiences. It's quick, clever, and just inappropriate enough for kids probably won't understand why the adults are laughing. Vintage Nicktoons. Rango is one of those rare animated movies that feels expensive, ambitious, and deeply personal at the same time. Its visuals are astonishing without becoming an empty spectacle. Its characters are exaggerated without feeling interchangeable. And its stories uses the Western genre to explore something surprisingly relatable. Most of us are, to some degree, performing the person who we want to be. Rango just does it with a cowboy hat and a medically concerning level of dehydration. The plot occasionally takes one detour too many, and its darker Western imagery may not work for every family, but I'd rather watch a movie that takes creative risks than sit through another perfectly polished animated feature with absolutely nothing going on beyond its eyes. You got Hans Zimmer's score arriving, sounding so much like Ennio Morricone that I expected Clint Eastwood to wander into the frame and ask who took his parking spot. This movie's weird. It's dusty, it's grotesque, and it's absolutely beautiful. So did Rango deserve more recognition as one of the most visually inventive animated movies of its era? Or did its strange designs and western tone keep you at a distance? Comment and let me know. And while you're down there, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and drink a glass of water. Because if you don't, an elderly tortoise is going to build a city on top of your apartment. And nobody needs that aggravation. I'm Joey.T.Cartoon.P, and thanks for watching this review on the Cartoon Palooza.